What if I told you that for nearly a decade the United States devoted an enormous amount of its intelligence resources, military power, and political attention to finding a single man, a man who had vanished into the shadows after orchestrating the deadliest terrorist attack in American history, and that the mission to find him would eventually lead American intelligence officers to a mysterious compound hidden in plain sight inside Pakistan? What if I told you that this operation was not the result of a lucky tip or a dramatic confession, but the product of years of painstaking intelligence work, thousands of reports, countless dead ends, and the determination of people who simply refused to stop looking? This is the story of Operation Neptune Spear, the mission that brought an end to one of the greatest manhunts ever conducted and became one of the most significant intelligence victories of the 21st century. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this operation mattered so much to millions of Americans and why the road to Abbottabad was far longer, more complicated, and more uncertain than most people realize. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you were when you first heard that Osama bin Laden had been found, because for many Americans it became one of those unforgettable moments that would forever be tied to the memory of September 11th. To understand why this mission carried so much weight, we need to go back to the morning of September 11th, 2001, a day that began like any other in the United States. People were heading to work, children were arriving at school, and millions of Americans were preparing for what seemed like a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. Then, in less than 2 hours, everything changed. 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airliners and turned them into weapons. 2 aircraft struck the towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, another crashed into the Pentagon, and a 4th went down in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back against the hijackers. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, making it the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. The images of collapsing skyscrapers, burning buildings, and terrified civilians shocked not only the United States but the entire world. In the days that followed, one name quickly emerged as the architect of the attacks: Osama bin Laden, the founder and leader of Al-Qaeda. Bin Laden was not an unknown figure. American intelligence agencies had been monitoring him for years because of his involvement in previous attacks against U.S. interests, including the bombings of American embassies in East Africa and the attack on the USS Cole. But after September 11th, he became the most wanted man on Earth. The United States launched what would become known as the Global War on Terror and made one objective absolutely clear: Osama bin Laden had to be found. The manhunt began almost immediately. Intelligence officers worked around the clock, reviewing every possible lead, analyzing every report, and coordinating with allies around the world. Military forces moved into Afghanistan, where Al-Qaeda had established its main base of operations under the protection of the Taliban government. Within weeks, American and Allied forces had toppled the Taliban regime, and many believed that bin Laden's capture was only a matter of time. Then came the Battle of Tora Bora, one of the most frustrating episodes in modern American military history. Intelligence reports suggested that bin Laden was hiding in a mountainous region of eastern Afghanistan near the Pakistani border. American forces and their allies launched operations designed to surround the area and prevent his escape. To many observers, it looked as though the world's most wanted terrorist had finally run out of options. Yet somehow, despite the pressure and despite the enormous resources devoted to the operation, bin Laden escaped. Whether through luck, careful planning, or the difficult terrain of the region, he slipped away and disappeared once again. His escape became a source of deep frustration within the intelligence community and a painful reminder that even the most powerful nation in the world could not always achieve its objectives quickly. As the years passed, the hunt continued. There were reports claiming that bin Laden had died from illness. There were rumors that he had fled to another country. Some believed he was still hiding in the mountains along the Afghan-Pakistani border, while others thought he had established new safe houses elsewhere in the region. Every possible lead was investigated. Intelligence agencies followed reports from informants, intercepted communications, and analyzed countless pieces of information, but nothing produced the breakthrough they desperately needed. Slowly, the search for bin Laden became one of the most complex intelligence operations in modern history, involving analysts, field officers, military personnel, and partner agencies from around the world. During this period, American intelligence officers reached an important conclusion. Bin Laden had become extraordinarily cautious. He understood the capabilities of American surveillance systems and knew that electronic communications could reveal his location. Unlike many terrorist leaders, he rarely used telephones, computers, or the internet. If he wanted to communicate with the outside world, he would need trusted messengers, people who could move between locations without attracting attention. This realization changed the focus of the entire operation. Instead of searching directly for bin Laden, intelligence agencies began searching for the people closest to him. Among the names that emerged during interrogations of captured al-Qaeda members was that of a mysterious courier. Several detainees mentioned him, but the information was frustratingly incomplete. Some described him as one of bin Laden's most trusted associates, while others seemed reluctant to discuss him at all, which only increased the CIA's interest. Experienced intelligence officers understood that the behavior of detainees often revealed more than their words. The fact that several al-Qaeda members appeared uncomfortable discussing this individual suggested that he might be extremely important. Years passed as analysts pieced together fragments of information from different sources. Intelligence work often lacks the dramatic action shown in movies. It involves long hours, endless reports, and an enormous amount of patience. Analysts compared old intelligence files, reviewed previous interrogations, and searched for patterns that others had missed. Gradually, the picture became clearer. Eventually, after years of effort, the CIA identified the courier's real identity. It was a major breakthrough because, for the first time in years, investigators had a concrete lead that could potentially lead them directly to bin Laden. Finding the courier proved to be another enormous challenge. The man had spent years living in the shadows and took significant precautions to avoid attracting attention. Yet American intelligence resources were now fully focused on him. Surveillance operations intensified as analysts attempted to map his movements and identify the places he visited. Then, in 2010, something extraordinary happened. The courier led investigators to a large and unusual compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. At first, the compound did not seem particularly remarkable, but the more intelligence officers studied it, the stranger it became. The property was surrounded by unusually high walls and security features that were uncommon for the area. The residents burned their trash instead of leaving it for collection. There were no visible telephone lines or internet connections despite the fact that the compound was significantly larger and more expensive than neighboring homes. The people living there appeared to avoid contact with outsiders and took extraordinary measures to protect their privacy. To experienced intelligence officers, these details immediately raised questions. Then another detail emerged that made the compound even more suspicious. Analysts observed a tall man living on the property whose identity remained unknown. They could not obtain a clear photograph of his face, and there was no reliable information about who he was. Because he frequently walked in circles inside the compound's courtyard, analysts began referring to him as the Pacer. The more they studied his behavior, the more convinced some officers became that they had finally found their target. The CIA launched one of the most intensive surveillance efforts of the entire manhunt. Analysts spent countless hours studying satellite imagery, measuring shadows, estimating the number of residents, and attempting to understand the daily routines of the people inside the compound. They built models, created reports, and debated every possible explanation. Was Osama bin Laden really living inside this house? Some analysts believed there was a strong possibility that he was. Others remained skeptical because they lacked direct evidence. There were no intercepted communications linking him to the property, no photographs proving his presence, and no physical evidence confirming his identity. The truth was that nobody knew for certain. Yet the circumstantial evidence continued to grow. The compound's unusual security measures, the mysterious courier, the unknown tall man, and the extraordinary efforts by the residents to remain isolated all pointed toward a remarkable possibility. For the first time in nearly 10 years, American intelligence officers believed they might actually know where Osama bin Laden was hiding. The information was eventually presented to senior government officials and then to President Barack Obama. The decision before him was one of the most difficult of his presidency. If the intelligence was correct, the United States had finally located the man responsible for the attacks of September 11. If the intelligence was wrong, any military action inside Pakistan could create a major international crisis and potentially cost innocent lives. The options were carefully discussed. An airstrike could destroy the compound but would also destroy valuable intelligence and eliminate any possibility of confirming bin Laden's identity. Waiting longer might produce more evidence, but it also increased the risk that the target could disappear once again. A commando raid offered the greatest chance of obtaining answers, but it also carried enormous risks because American forces would be operating deep inside another country's territory. As meetings continued in Washington, the pressure grew more intense. Nearly 10 years had passed since the attacks that changed America forever, and now the hunt seemed to be approaching its conclusion. Intelligence officers, military leaders, and senior officials all understood the importance of the moment. Yet one question still remained unanswered and would ultimately determine everything that happened next. Was the mysterious man inside that compound truly Osama bin Laden, or were they about to risk everything based on an assumption that could change the course of history? As the meetings inside the White House continued, President Barack Obama faced one of the most difficult decisions of his presidency. There was no perfect option and no guarantee of success. The intelligence community believed there was a strong possibility that Osama bin Laden was hiding inside the compound in Abbottabad, but they could not say it with complete certainty. Some analysts were highly confident, while others remained skeptical because there was still no photograph, no intercepted communication, and no piece of physical evidence proving that the world's most wanted terrorist was inside those walls. Yet everyone in the room understood one thing: if they waited too long, the opportunity might disappear forever. Bin Laden had escaped once before at Tora Bora, and nobody wanted to repeat that mistake. The president listened to military commanders, intelligence officers, and national security advisors as they debated the risks of every possible course of action. An airstrike would eliminate the compound, but it would also destroy valuable intelligence and make it impossible to confirm whether bin Laden had actually been killed. Waiting for more information seemed safer, but every additional day increased the possibility that the target would move to another location. That left the most dangerous option of all: sending American Special Operations Forces directly into Pakistan to capture or kill the target. The mission would require an extraordinary level of planning and secrecy. The United States could not inform Pakistani authorities in advance because there was concern that information might leak and allow the target to escape. This meant that American helicopters and special operators would enter Pakistani airspace without permission, conduct the raid, and leave before local military forces could react. If something went wrong, the consequences could be severe. American personnel might be killed or captured, a helicopter could crash, or the operation could trigger a major diplomatic crisis between two countries that were officially allies in the fight against terrorism. Despite these risks, planners gradually became convinced that a raid offered the best chance of achieving the mission's objectives. The responsibility for carrying out the operation would fall to one of the most elite military units in the world, the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group, better known as SEAL Team 6. The operators selected for the mission immediately began an intense period of preparation. They studied detailed models of the compound, memorized the layout of the buildings, and rehearsed every possible scenario. A full-scale replica of the Abbottabad compound was constructed so that the assault force could practice entering rooms, moving through hallways, and responding to unexpected situations. Every detail mattered because there would be no time for hesitation once the mission began. The operators trained repeatedly, conducting the assault over and over until each movement became almost automatic. They prepared for the possibility of armed resistance, for the possibility that the target might attempt to escape, and even for the possibility that Pakistani military forces could arrive before the mission was completed. The pressure was enormous because everyone involved understood that they were preparing for one of the most important counterterrorism operations in American history. Finally, after days of deliberation and preparation, President Obama gave the order. The mission would proceed. On the evening of May 1, 2011, in Washington, which was already the early hours of May 2 in Pakistan, the operation began. The assault force boarded specially modified helicopters designed to reduce radar detection and flew toward Abbottabad under the cover of darkness. Inside the aircraft, the operators sat quietly, fully aware that they were about to participate in a mission that could become one of the greatest successes in American military history or one of its most painful failures. The flight into Pakistan was tense and silent. Every minute brought them closer to the target and increased the possibility that something unexpected could happen. As the helicopters approached the compound, an unforeseen problem immediately emerged. One of the helicopters encountered aerodynamic difficulties while attempting to hover inside the high walls of the compound. The combination of warm air, confined space, and the design of the aircraft created conditions that caused the pilot to lose lift. Within seconds, the helicopter made a hard landing inside the compound. Although the crew survived and the operators quickly exited the aircraft, the mission had suddenly become far more dangerous. A key part of the plan had failed before the assault had even begun. Yet this is where years of training and preparation made the difference. The operators adapted immediately and continued the mission without hesitation. The assault force rapidly secured the compound and began moving through the buildings. Every room had to be cleared, every individual identified, and every potential threat eliminated. The operators moved with speed and precision, advancing floor by floor in darkness and confusion. They encountered resistance from several people inside the compound, and the situation remained highly unpredictable because nobody knew exactly where bin Laden was located. Time was critical. The longer the operation lasted, the greater the chance that local authorities would become aware of what was happening and respond. Then came the moment that nearly 10 years of searching had led to. As American operators moved through the upper floors of the main building, they encountered the man they had traveled halfway around the world to find. Osama bin Laden was located inside the compound and was killed during the raid. In that moment, one of the longest and most intensive manhunts in modern history came to an end. The man who had orchestrated the attacks of September 11, 2001, and who had spent nearly a decade hiding from the world's most powerful intelligence and military forces had finally been found. But the mission was not over. The operators still had to leave Pakistan safely. They quickly began collecting intelligence materials from the compound, including computers, hard drives, documents, and digital media that could provide valuable information about Al-Qaeda and its operations. Intelligence officers had long suspected that bin Laden remained involved in directing the terrorist organization, and the materials recovered from the compound would later provide extraordinary insights into how Al-Qaeda functioned and communicated. At the same time, preparations were made to destroy the damaged helicopter to prevent sensitive technology from falling into foreign hands. Explosives were placed, and the aircraft was destroyed before the assault force prepared to depart. As the helicopters lifted off and headed out of Pakistan, a sense of relief began to spread among the operators. The mission had succeeded despite unexpected difficulties, and they were carrying with them the confirmation that the world's most wanted terrorist had finally been located and eliminated. Back in Washington, senior officials monitored the operation in real time from the White House Situation Room. The tension during those moments was extraordinary because communication delays and limited information meant that even the president and his advisors did not know exactly what was happening until the operation was complete. Later that night, President Obama addressed the nation and announced the news that millions of Americans had waited nearly 10 years to hear. The United States had conducted an operation against a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, and Osama bin Laden was dead. Across the country, people gathered in public squares, outside the White House, and at Ground Zero in New York City. Many celebrated, others reflected quietly, and countless families who had lost loved ones on September 11 felt that an important chapter had finally come to an end. Although nothing could undo the tragedy of that day, the successful conclusion of the manhunt carried enormous symbolic significance for the American people. Operation Neptune Spear quickly became one of the most famous special operations missions in history, but its success was about far more than the actions of the operators who entered the compound. The raid represented years of work by intelligence analysts who refused to abandon difficult leads, by field officers who collected information under dangerous circumstances, and by military personnel who prepared relentlessly for a mission that might never have happened. It demonstrated the extraordinary capabilities of American intelligence and special operations forces when they worked together toward a common objective. It also showed the importance of patience, persistence, and the willingness to continue searching even when success seems impossible. More than a decade later, Operation Neptune Spear remains one of the defining moments of the post-September 11 era. It was the culmination of nearly 10 years of determination by a nation that refused to forget the attacks that had changed its history. The mission proved that even the most elusive targets can eventually be found and that the combination of intelligence, technology, and highly trained personnel can achieve extraordinary results. For millions of Americans, the operation was not simply about the death of one man. It was about perseverance, justice, and the belief that those responsible for acts of terror could not hide forever. It became a story of patience rewarded and a reminder that some missions take years to complete but are never abandoned. So what do you think? Was Operation Neptune Spear one of the greatest intelligence and special operations missions ever conducted, or do you believe another covert operation deserves that title? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoy stories about secret missions, elite operators, and the hidden side of history, make sure to subscribe to Spy Tales, leave a like, and turn on notifications because there are many more incredible stories waiting to be uncovered from the shadows of history.